This is my kitchen table and also my filing system. Over much of the past 3 decades, I've been an investor. The highest calling of mankind, I've often thought, was private equity. And then I started interviewing.
While I watch your interviews, I know how to do some interviewing.
I've learned in doing my interviews how leaders make it to the top.
I asked him how much he wanted. He said $250. I said, fine. I didn't negotiate with him, and I did no due diligence.
I have something I'd like to sell, and how they stay there. You don't feel inadequate now because being only the second wealthiest man in the world, is that right? One of the greatest baseball players ever is Cal Ripken. He set a record for playing in 2,632 consecutive games over 17 years. He was an All-Star 19 times, a member of the Hall of Fame, twice most valuable player in the American League, and also once a World Series champion. I had a chance to sit down with Cal Ripken recently to talk about his current life working for and with the Baltimore Orioles, a team that he made very famous. So it was said in baseball that the unbreakable record was Lou Gehrig's record of playing in 2,130 games consecutively. Nobody thought that could ever be broken. You broke it. You played in 2,632 games consecutively over 17 years. Why did you do that? I mean, did you ever think of maybe taking a day off would be a good thing, or?
So you're not going to ask me what my secret was, right?
Well, I'll get to that.
I don't know if I have one. I mean, I love the game a lot. Your everyday player was defined in those years as playing every game. And it was an honor to be thought of and counted on each and every day by your teammates. So I had my dad, who was also a coach, when I first came in, probably for the first 11 or 12 years of my career. And I think the real reason that I played is that I couldn't come into a ballpark and say you have turf toe, where you stubbed your toe and say, okay, I might need to miss a game or two. I couldn't face my dad, let alone the manager of the team.
Well, like I've been, working for many years, and I have not done 17 years consecutively going in every day. You have a headache someday, you don't feel good. You never had a headache, no cold, nothing happened?
Yes. All of those things happen.
You played through it.
You learn to play through different things, and you find out really quickly that I can still compete. I still can play, even though I might be less than 100%.
Baseball was called the national pastime for a long time, but obviously other sports have taken a lot of attention away from baseball, basketball, and football, for example. Do you still feel that Americans have a certain passion for baseball that is similar to what they had 20, 30, 40 years ago, or do you think it's really changed a lot?
I think there's a deep love for baseball still in the country, and I see that the Ripken Baseball was a kid's business that we developed, experiential when you play tournaments and we teach and those sorts of things. And you can witness it right in front of you, that the kids, 8 to 12-year-olds, feel the same way about baseball that we did. I think what's happened in sports overall is that there's specialization that happens earlier in the sports, and so you're not playing baseball, basketball, and football all that time. You're specializing really early on. So there's a lot less kids, I think, that are playing baseball. But the ones that are playing are actually playing more of it because they play spring, summer, and
well,
fall.
Speaking of that, lots of pitchers these days have elbow problems. They now get surgery called Tommy John surgery, and players have to take a year and a half before they're really going to play again. Why are there so many pitchers who seem to have this problem now? They didn't have as many of those problems when you were playing. Is it because they're playing so young and they're throwing so many different kind of pitches that really hurt the elbow and the arm?
Well, I think some of that is true because Tommy John surgery has come down even to like high school and sometimes kids younger than that. And I think some parents feel like we'll just keep throwing, and if it breaks or whatever else, we can always fix it and you'll come back throwing harder than you did before. I think that's the wrong way to look at it. But I think in the big leagues, with all the analytics that go around, I think pitchers are chasing velocity more, and so there's more training to get your arm stronger, to throw the ball harder, but they're chasing movement. So there's two things that happen. Is you throw a fastball, you get behind the baseball, but then when you try to make it move with the same power, you're torquing your elbow or your wrist right at the end to try to make it move. Right. And then all this pressure goes right here. And I think a lot of chasing speed and chasing movement, the combination of those two is causing it.
When a golfer is lining up a putt on a tournament, everybody has to be quiet. Nobody's throwing anything at his head. Why does he need to have so much quiet? But you're not allowed to talk or say anything when you're putting for 5 inches. But if somebody's throwing a ball at your head 100 miles an hour, they can scream and yell. Doesn't it seem that's ass backwards?
Yes. Yes, it is interesting, though. When you play in front of a packed house, it's just noise. You know, it's not, you don't hear the individual things. I mean, here in New York, I think the fans felt that they were part of the game. And so they were trying to get inside your head. They were screaming things at you, try to play a little mind game with. And if you beat them and you did really well, you know, they'd almost go, Cal, see you tomorrow. You know, it was all part of it. The Boston fans were a little different, is that they were more personal. That if you beat them or whatever else, they'd hold it against you for your whole life.
You can challenge a call now, and they go up to New York and they watch it on video and they make a decision there. You think that's good or bad?
I like it, yeah. I mean, because one play could turn the whole outcome of the game, and they have the technology to do it now. And I think what you're going to see in the next couple of years is some form of the robotic strike zone. You know, whether they're testing it in the minor leagues on a challenge system, or like every third game, they just they have something in the ear of the umpire, and the robot or whatever calls the whole game based on when the ball's on the plate. He just tells the guy what to do. And so they're testing those things out. And I think the challenge system might be good, because a key pitch in the 8th inning with the bases loaded, you know, and it's called a ball or a strike, you know, the ball turns it in favor of the team that's got the bases loaded. The strike kind of gets them out of it.
Professional athletes are idealized. I mean, it's hard to believe this, but they're liked more than politicians, right? So athletes are really well liked and admired and so forth. But then when you finish your career, you have a whole different life. So you retired at what age? 41?
41, yeah.
41. You played 22 years. 21 years in the major leagues, and you retired at an age that, you know, is old for a professional athlete, but young for somebody in private equity or something like that. So when you retired at that age, did you say, what am I going to do the rest of my life? And what did you decide to do for the remaining 10, 20 years of your life? What did you do?
So if you save your money pretty well, then you have choices, you know, and you could decide to learn how to play golf, and like a lot of people do, and kind of retire early.
Are you a golfer?
I play a little bit, but no. I could be pretty good.
I think you should try miniature golf. That's what I do.
So I looked at it as, you know, you kind of get bored. How can you do that? I looked at it as a second chance for a career opportunity. And so you looked, I wanted to learn business, and we bought minor league teams. And so it was a comfortable business model that you can kind of learn business that way. And that was kind of fun. At first it felt like I spotted everybody else 20 years ahead of me. I'm 41, but I seem like I'm 21, you know, in the business world. You come out, and then you learn that a lot of the things you learned along the way in baseball can apply to your work ethic, how you go about doing things, your preparation, and all that kind of stuff. That all applies to what you're doing now.
So now that you're an owner of the Baltimore Orioles, how do you feel about these high-priced contracts that players are getting? You used to be a player who probably wanted higher-priced contracts. Now you're an owner. How do you look at that? Differently?
Slightly. I try to think of what are the other intangible values that you can offer a player besides the bottom line dollars, because the bottom line dollars are so big now, or whatever else, that you can make a case you're saying, well, how much? But I mean, it's about ego, and it's about breaking the bank, and it's about agents wanting to continue to make it go up for other people that come through. But if you take, my situation was, I wanted to play in one place. I wanted to have control of playing in one place. So I think if we get to a point where we're trying to convince one of our players to stay, you know, you want to try to tell them all the values that are associated with, you know, Derek Jeter playing his whole career in a pinstripe uniform, me playing my whole career in the Orioles, and what's that mean for you in the bigger picture? And hopefully they'll value some of that, but it's going to be a competitive landscape where we're going to have to pay some salaries.
And Baltimore is a smaller city compared to some of the New York teams or Los Angeles. Is that a big problem when you're in a smaller city in Major League Baseball?
I think overall, I never liked the idea because you were a small market team you couldn't compete. Because I think competition is in your knowledge. You know, you're drafting, you get to draft, you get to sign players, you get to develop players. You know, that's not all free agency that's happening. But if you're a big market team and you make a mistake in judgment on a player, you can throw more money at your mistakes. When you're a smaller market team, you have to be better at your baseball decisions. I looked at myself as a sportsman. Maybe the value of the entertainment was in the collective where you're playing well as a team and you win, and that's cool. Then all of a sudden it seemed to step over to, I think a lot of players might think that they're entertainers now.
During his 21-year career, spent entirely with the Baltimore Orioles, Cal Ripken Jr. broke nearly every team record. He's the Orioles' franchise leader in hits, runs, RBIs, home runs, and games played. However, the record that earned him the name Iron Man isn't just an Orioles record, but the all-time consecutive games played record in MLB history. But just how unbreakable is this record? The record was held unbroken for over 40 years before Ripken even joined the major leagues in 1981. The man who held it, New York Yankees legend, Lou Gehrig. Lou Gehrig joined the New York Yankees in 1923 at age 19. He didn't gain a permanent foothold on the team until 1925 when his streak began. Over the course of the next 14 seasons, Gehrig would help the Yankees win 6 World Series titles alongside other Yankees legends including Babe Ruth and later Joe DiMaggio. In August 1933, during the course of this historic Yankees run, Gehrig broke the previous consecutive games record of 1,307 held by former Yankee teammate Everett Scott. Gehrig would go on to shatter this record, playing every game until he was forced to end his streak due to health concerns on May 2, 1939, at a staggering 2,130 games. A few weeks later, Gehrig was diagnosed with ALS and was honored at Yankee Stadium on July 4, 1939, where he officially retired from baseball.
Today, I consider myself the luckiest man on the face of the earth.
For the next 42 years, no player came close to challenging Gehrig's record. But then, in 1981, Cal Ripken Jr. joined the Baltimore Orioles and began his campaign to break the unbreakable record. Cal took the MLB by storm, winning Rookie of the Year in 1982 when his Iron Man streak began, and following that up the next season by winning American League MVP in the 1983 World Series. Over the course of his career, Ripken would rack up 19 All-Star appearances, 2 Golden Gloves, and a second American League MVP in 1991. He had already established himself as one of the greatest baseball players in Major League history as he continued to extend his streak. Then, on September 5, 1995, the world watched as Lou Gehrig's record that had stood for 56 years was broken by Cal Ripken Jr. Ripken would go on to extend his streak for another 3 years, finally capping the all-time record at 2,632 games in a row, over 500 games more than Lou Gehrig's previous mark. Ripken retired after the 2001 season and was elected into the Baseball Hall of Fame in 2007. It has been 26 years since Ripken ended his streak, and no player has come close to challenging it. So I played the Little League All-Star shortstop and when I was 8 and 9, and I didn't know whether I was going to get to the major leagues or not. When did you realize you were going to be better than someone like me? Did you realize that you were a little leaguer? When you were a little leaguer, did you really realize you were going to be really good enough to play in the major leagues?
I knew pretty quickly. I grew up in and around baseball. My dad was the manager of the minor leagues for the Orioles in the first 14 years of my life. So I went to work with my dad, or as early as 8 or 9. He put me in a uniform. I was the bat boy. I shagged in the outfield. I had a chance to ask all the players, how they caught the fly ball, how they swung the bat. So I had all these teachers in front of me, but I had the skill, that was pretty obvious early on.
Okay, so you played in high school. I assume you did very well in high school?
Yes.
Okay, so you get drafted by the Orioles, and at what point when you're in the minor leagues, all the players played in the minor leagues for a while, did you realize you weren't just going to be an average player, you were really going to be a super player, or did you not realize that in the beginning?
No, I was 17. I was a second-round draft pick by the Orioles. I turned 18 at the end of the summer, and so it was my birthday's August 24th, so I was playing a couple of months before my 18th birthday. And when I first went away to play pro ball, you're a pretty big fish in a small pond in high school. You thought you were pretty good. And then you go, and all of a sudden you're part of a team, and you look around, and no longer you're not the big fish anymore. There was one shortstop by the name of Bob Bonner that came out of Texas A&M. He was like a 6th-round pick for us that year. And I was taking ground balls and doing stuff with him, and he clearly was light years ahead of me. He had a better arm. He could field the ball better. He was quicker on the transfer. And I kept looking at him going, I'm never going to play. You know, this guy's too good. I'm not that good. And they moved him immediately to AA, which opened up the spot for me. And then I got my feet on the ground. I started playing pretty well and started to hit a couple home runs in my next year. And then I got to AA, and then I had a breakout season. And in 2 years, I caught Bob Bonner and passed him to the big leagues. So he stayed the same, and I got better.
What year did he get into the Hall of Fame?
I think he's a minister in Africa right now.
So speaking of the Hall of Fame, you were elected with 98.5% of the vote. Have you ever figured out who that person was that didn't vote for you? I mean, who is this person waiting for?
I've hunted all 5 of them down. I think in my particular year, I think Mariano Rivera just went in at 100%, right?
The only one.
Of the vote. And in my particular year, there was a protest vote where 5 people didn't turn in a ballot in that particular year as a protest to the steroid era. But they said, well, and so they counted against you.
Did anybody ever come to you and say, look, you're really good, but you could be even better if you take some of these drugs? They didn't try that?
No. Looking back on it, you could probably see signs in hindsight that players that might have used, but when you're playing, if you're not in this secret society, you don't know, and I didn't know.
So some players, they were like 180 pounds, and then later they're 250 pounds. You didn't suspect maybe they were doing something unusual?
Yes.
You're 6'4", and traditionally shortstops were more my height. And when you came along, people didn't want people like me to be shortstops anymore. So did you change the game of baseball by saying shortstops should be big and better hitters, or is it going back to the old mode of being fast and good baseball stealers but not great hitters?
Well, I mean, a lot of the shortstops, Derek Jeter being one of them, gives me credit for my success at the position as a bigger shortstop that gave them opportunities that maybe otherwise they wouldn't have had. But I kind of think, Derek, you would have carved out your own path. But I did move from third to short. I signed, I was 6'2", 180 when I came out of high school. And then I had a late growth spurt. I almost grew 3 inches, and I put on, 5 to 8 pounds a year. And by the time I got to the big leagues, I was almost 6'5", 220. And they had put me at third base, but then Earl Weaver had this vision that I could play shortstop, and we'd be a better team if I went over to shortstop. So he one day just put me there, and my success at the position as a bigger guy, maybe is like when I'm a basketball fan. I wish I could have been a basketball player, but I remember Magic Johnson changing the thought of a point guard at 6'9". He's 6'9", all of a sudden the advantages he had of his size. I think people started to understand that a bigger guy could play shortstop and second base, and today they're some of the more celebrated positions.
When that your contract, I think your highest compensation level was $6 million a year. $6 million a year. That's a good compensation level in those days for sure, and today for the average person, that's a great income. But today, there are some players who are making $200, $300, $400 million over a period of years, one $700 million. Do you ever think maybe you should have waited a little bit longer to play in the major leagues? Or do you ever regret the fact that some people are making $700 million and they're not likely to be as good as you?
So every day I think that, yes. No, it is really interesting is that I had a really good job. I was a baseball player and you got paid for it. And the compensation, I was one of the early ones that broke $1 million a year. And then I got to $2 million a year. And then after towards the end, I was at 6, but then it started going crazy. I look at it, and I remember all the old players that said, I wish that I would have played in that era. But I think the game evolves. The business of it used to be in baseball. I think at least I looked at myself as a sportsman. Maybe the value of the entertainment was in the collective, where you're playing well as a team and you win, and that's cool. Then all of a sudden it seemed to step over to, I think a lot of players might think that they're entertainers now. Right. So it's a little bit more than what you do on the field. It's what maybe your commercials, things you do off the field. I think they see themselves differently.
I have a grandson who's 4 years old. If he wanted to be a Major League Baseball player, what's the best advice you would give to a young person? He's a little young for advice maybe, but what is a 6 or 8-year-old or 10-year-old who aspires to be a baseball player, what should they do?
Well, I think the worst thing you could do is put too much pressure on your kid. Like if you want it for him as opposed to him wanting it. I think
Father didn't put pressure on you. He was a professional coach. He didn't.
No, I mean, matter of fact, I could tell you that because my dad was in professional baseball, he only saw 2 of my games between the age of 8 and 18 before I got drafted. Parts of 2 because he had.
But he didn't give you tips or anything, or tell you to do this or that?
No, I mean, he was a great instructor. I witnessed him instructing other people in the minor leagues, so I learned through his instruction, everybody else. But he never stood over me and said, "You got to play baseball."
Now, when you're a professional baseball player or a former professional baseball player, as famous as you are, people come up and all the time they want autographs, selfies, and they say, "I hate to bother you, but can I bother you with a selfie or an autograph request?" What do you say? You say, "I'm too busy," or you just do it? Or how do you deal with all that? And when you go to a hotel and you're a Major League Baseball player, people have all these little kids who are trying to get autographs. How do you deal with all that?
When you get old, they don't do it so much anymore. No, I'm thankful that I still can't believe that I get recognized as readily as I do. And to me, you always keep in mind, and sometimes someone approaching you, they're all nervous and they lose their mind and they say, "You're my biggest fan," and I go, "I am," but they lose it. But then you have to keep in mind that it's meaningful to them, and so at that moment, by signing your name for a little kid and their eyeballs get all, and they run back to their mom or whatever else and say, "Look what I got." So you help that happen. So if you remember what happens afterwards, you don't focus on and you just manage it. You just get through it.
And what was it like the day that you broke the record of Lou Gehrig? There was enormous fan outpouring. Everybody's calling you. You're nationwide TV, and you're running around the stadium and so forth. Was that the highlight of your life professionally?
I would say there's 2 moments. I answer that question in 2 parts. The best feeling I ever had on the baseball field was catching the last out of the World Series 42 years ago. 42 years ago? 41 years ago, 1983, little humpback line drive. When you catch it, this part of the dream of being a baseball player is to win the World Series. And then now, because I caught the last out, I won the World Series. So that's the best feeling. Second best feeling, and probably the best personal moment, was the lap around Camden Yards. I was embarrassed that the game was stopped because the game became official halfway through. And then everybody kept clapping. I kept saying, "Thank you, thank you." And then Bobby Bonilla and Rafael Palmeiro pushed me out of the line and said, "You're going to have to take a lap around here before we'll never get the game started." And I thought it was a silly idea. So I went around, started shaking hands. The celebration went from almost 50,000 down to like 1-on-1. And it was kind of cool that way. And by the time I got down to third base, I could care less if the game ever started again.